terrorism and COVID-19. So as I say, I'm trying to keep this as upbeat and cheerful as possible. So we'll start off with the application that sort of kicked all this off, namely thinking about terrorism. And this is sort of the motivating picture. And this comes from the Global Terrorism Database, the GTD, which is a compilation of terrorist events as formulated by the University of Maryland. The START is a particular acronym of something that's an offshoot of the University of Maryland. And this is quite a nice picture in giving us an idea of what's going on in space. But my immediate thought on seeing this is what necessarily is going on in time in specific places. Are there points in time at which there's an increase in the probability of a terrorist attack, for example, in a given country or a given region? Is there a point in time where, for example, things get lots and lots safer across the globe? These are all questions that were sort of occupying my mind as I saw this, sort of trying to think about various different scales in which you might see changes over time. Maybe not abrupt changes, maybe gradual changes, but nevertheless something that might align with some interesting policy choices or just general things that are going on which we could try and emulate to make things more peaceful. So just to give a bit of background to the database, as I say, it's a global historical record of terrorist incidents maintained by these chaps at the University of Maryland, and they have an acronym of START, which is the second most pretentious acronym you'll see in this talk. And it's a compilation of events since the beginning of 1970. And the way in which they collected the data, certainly up until the 1990s, was based on various multilingual experts trawling through various media reports. So there's a little bit of a bias towards where they're collecting information. So for example, former communist countries, it was rather difficult to collect information from the so-called Second World at the time. And this is obvious from the data set, that we'll discuss this later. But in the main, it seems to be pretty sensible. The picture that it gives us seems to be pretty reliable. One quite significant weakness of the data set is that data from the year 1993 were lost in an office move. This office move took place after some frantic activity in 2001. And I'll give you one guess as to exactly why it was suddenly decided this was a much more useful and worthwhile data set to study back in 2001. It's been covered. I don't know whether they just lost the boxes somewhere, but the data from 1993 had never been satisfactorily recovered. So that's not available in the version of the data set that we have. Another problem, I guess, from the perspective of being in 2020, is that our copy of the database concludes at the end of 2017. So the open source database, unfortunately, doesn't have 2018 or 2019. You can pay to have the souped up license for 2018 and 2019. Perhaps I should have paid, but A, I'm a cheapskate, and B, I sort of wanted to have something that anybody could go away and analyze. So anybody can have access to anything up to 2017. So I stuck with that for that reason. But I think it's available on a rolling basis. So if we were to wait a little bit longer, you could probably access 2018 and 2019 in due course. Good. Okay, so that's a very quick background on exactly how the data has been compiled. Clearly, there's a little bit of a focus on exactly who is collecting the data. But perhaps the biggest issue is how we actually define a terrorist incident itself. And this is where I'm sure all of us are going to disagree with the definition. I don't think there's a definition that two people are necessarily going to agree on, but here we go. What defines a terrorist incident according to START? Well, in addition to involving violence committed by a non-state actor, and already there's potentially some controversy there, but has to be a non-state actor, at least two of the following three criteria must be satisfied by the event. So we must have a goal that is religious, economic, political, social, that it is purely, well, is more than purely simply thinking about the pursuit of profit. So when we say an economic goal here, it's not purely going to be confined to thinking about the direct benefit of the perpetrators. It has to be some sort of wider goal. That's one possible criterion. The other two here are an evidence to intimidate, coerce a wider audience than those that are immediately impacted by the event. And I do feel that this one is well, it feels intuitive to me. And finally, this final criterion seemed a little bit strange, but it's in there, so I've got to include it. The action must be outside the parameters permitted by international humanitarian law. Now, I've yet to meet a terrorist incident that was inside the parameters permitted by international humanitarian law, but this is, I think, to preclude many acts of war, so-called acts of war. And this is a whole legal quagmire that I'm not going to get into right now. I'm sure we could have very lively debates about this point, but this is just to make sure that essentially this becomes a manageable data set. So I think ultimately we have about sort of 600,000 incidents from 1970 to 2017, over 50 years. And I guess if we sort of got creative with some of these sets of criteria, yes, we might have problems and suddenly things might explode. So we'll keep things relatively under control and have these as our conditions. So we have to satisfy at least 2 of these 3, in addition to having violence. And there's a pretty rich picture of the events in terms of the information that we can glean from the events in the database. So in addition to having information about exactly where the event happened, when it happened, who perpetrated it, somewhat tragically how many casualties there were, etc., weapons used and so forth. We also have, for example, a regional stratification of the event. So thinking not just on a global scale or a country scale, but also on this more regional scale. And for the purposes of the remainder of this talk, I thought it was interesting to focus on these regional stratifications rather than on countries. If only because many of the more, let's say, interesting countries with regards to global terrorism over the last 50 years have particularly fluid political borders more often than not. Whereas those countries which might have fluid political borders don't tend to transcend the regional stratification of GDT. So for example, Germany here, East Germany, probably most people would classify as being in Eastern Europe prior to 1989. We now classify it as Western Europe for the purposes of sort of 1990s onwards. It's not going to skew the data too much because, as I say, the former communist bloc in the 1970s, 1980s was not really contributing all that much to data collected for the DGT, which again is probably a bias down to the fact of how we've collected the data. These are the regional stratifications we've gone for. Pick your favorite region, pick your favorite color. And apologies, this talk is not going to be especially friendly to colorblind people. I do apologize, but hopefully it should be obvious that, for example, this region of the Middle East here is in black. That's the one we'll choose completely at random for the next slide. And we have here an incident count, a count of the number of incidents per month since the beginning of 1970 to the end of 2017 for each of these regions. And as I say, sort of the region I picked was the Middle East and North Africa here. And we can see that prior to the turn of the century, the number of terrorist incidents per month was not all that great compared to the other regions of the Earth. Great here, not meaning good, but I guess large, because if we think about concentrate on the 2010s here, we have a much larger preponderance of terrorist actions, particularly since the Arab Spring, which is something we'll flag up again later. So this is quite immediate, that there are points in time where things of interest appear to be happening. So as I mentioned, for the Middle East, we have something that looks like the Arab Spring having a massive effect on the number of terrorist actions per month. In somewhere like South Asia, where we have this cyan line here, again, there seems to be this surge, this almost this very abrupt point in time where things are altering. And it makes sense to try and focus in on exactly where this happened to see if there was a change in policy, change in leadership, something going on, which led to the probability of a terrorist attack changing in some way. But equally, it's important to ask the question as to whether changes in the probability of a terrorist attack are actually altering in more than one place at the same time. Is there anywhere in the last 50 years, at any point in time, where risk has just uniformly changed across the world? Or is it the case that changes in terrorist activity remain localized? The sociologists actually think the latter, and this sort of goes against my intuition. It sort of probably goes against most of our intuition, right? Because we constantly hear from the press about terrorist actions going on in various places and how we're immediately going to be at risk, things that we're immediately going to be under attack. So while that might be sensationalizing things a little bit, it makes sense to think about whether our risk changes as well. So that's the overall picture of things, and we want to concentrate on trying to find changes that are local, restricted to say one or two regions, or global, affecting essentially the whole world. So people have been thinking about change points in the DGT for a while, but haven't really been doing it in a sort of red-blooded statistical sense or data science sense. So these are the principal investigators of the DGT here, Lefree and Dugan, and they've noted things qualitatively like the fact that terrorism tripled globally between 1976 and 79, with a doubling just between 78 and 79, unbelievably. That's sort of a global observation. On a very local scale, they've been thinking about groups such as Arsala, which is the Armenian secret army for the liberation of Armenia. Again, another acronym in this talk. Again, not the most pretentious acronym you'll see. And their activities were severely curtailed by a botched bombing at an airport in Paris in 1983. And the reason for this was that prior to 1983, they'd been focusing on trying to target as many Turkish civilians as possible. And in this bombing in 1983, they unintentionally killed many non-Turkish civilians. And there was quite a wide backlash from the group of Armenians in Turkey who were supporting their actions, which is by no means all of the Armenians in Turkey. And as a result, the group became sort of much less successful in their eyes, and their activities essentially wound down during the middle 1980s. And sort of in between this thinking on this very local scale and this very global scale, we have the regional scale. So thinking about, say, terrorism in Latin America, say Central America. And there's this note here that it peaked between 1980 and sort of the late 1990s. And this is down to the fact that this region was sort of pretty plagued by internal strife, civil war. And this is something that we'll observe later. So there's these considerations in different scales, but not necessarily doing them at the same time. They've been sort of looked at qualitatively in different publications. Slightly more justifiable, at least statistically quantifiable statistical actions in the past, again, are sort of focused on specific global regions or nations. So in the case of Northern Ireland, which is perhaps something that is sort of closer to home for many of us, there was this study done in 2010, which looked at using the DGT to analyse 6 events or policies enacted by the British government between 1969 and 1992 to attempt to reduce terrorist activity in Northern Ireland. And as you can see, 5 of these policies actually led to a backlash, an increased amount of violence in this period of time. And only one of them, Operation Motorman, which I think was, I wasn't around at the time. I wasn't born in 1992, so I can't comment on this. But clearly, overall, these actions did more harm than good. And just not to give a spoiler, but later on we'll discover that the real change point in all this was in 1998, which, of course, corresponds to the Good Friday Agreement. So that's one thing that's been done, and while it's a fairly small scale, it's nevertheless feels more statistically sound, sort of just dipping your finger in the air and saying, yes, terrorism has tripled. Quite an interesting study from 2013 looked at actions in Colombia, specifically with regards to FARC, which I guess has been in the news sort of more recently. So here a hidden Markov model was used to look at the years between 1998 and 2006. And here we're focusing on daily activities. So we're focusing eventually in this presentation on what's going on each month. Here we're thinking about every day. And there was a change point that was found at the end of June 1998. And this was due to the fact that the US was plowing a considerable amount of money here to combat the drug economy. This was a positive change. I think there was a change in policy again in 2000, and this led to an increase in terror activity between 2000 and 2006. But certainly things didn't get quite as bad as they were in early 1998. But this is just a lever up here. I didn't want to include more text because there was this rather nice picture of the Colombian flag that I thought was more worth your time. So really this gets to the heart of the issue of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to have statistical power to detect both local and global changes. So here is an example of both. Again, it's for a very boring data set. So I've only got 4 variates here and it's completely simulated. It's not corresponding to any actual real data. So we have on the left here a change from this regime to this regime here. And clearly it's affecting just one change. All of these variates here are unchanged by this change point. So we'll call this a local change, or if you like, a sparse change point, a change that is sparse in the number of variates. On the right here, though, we have a change which is seemingly affecting many more of the variates in the system, a change which is more global. And if you like, we can call this a dense change. So it's a change that's affecting most, if not all, of the variates in our system. And we want to have good statistical power when we're devising a test to detect both of these things. We want to be computationally efficient, but we want to make sure that we're actually picking up both of these types of change. Not least because both of them are interesting, right? If going back to the global terrorism example, we want to be able to pick up local changes in policy and global changes in policy having an impact. So the traditional way of doing this, and this is the first of just 3 equations in this talk, I promise. The traditional way of trying to look for change points is to use the Q-sum test statistic. And the Q-sum test statistic is really rather simple. We're just thinking about if we've got a candidate point to which we're thinking about placing a change, we'll just look at the mean either side of it. So it's just we'll take a weighted sum either side of the point t. And the idea is that if we have a change there that looks sensible at time t, it should be well above some well suitably chosen threshold, which in this case is beta. And indeed, for this simulated example here, that's pretty boring, but nevertheless quite subtle, we do actually have a change at precisely time equals 500. And this maximizes our peak, if you like. This is our Q-sum peak, and it's well above this threshold. So this is sort of or was the gold standard for many, many years. It's really rather simple, and we can show that it has good statistical properties. But this is just for a single data sequence. It's just for yj, j1 to n, really, really boring case. It's for the Gaussian change in mean as well. How can we extend this to multiple variates? So blink and you miss it. This doesn't count as equation 2. This just counts as a very, very slight shift of equation 1. Now we have data not just across the points in time, but also across the variates in space. So for example, thinking about the specific stratification, the specific regions in the GDT, say Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and so on. And now we have weighted sums, but they're weighted sums on a specific region. The WITs correspond to a specific region I, and thinking about placing a change at time t. Okay, so the game here is all about combining these WITs across the regions. How have previous methods done this? Have they been able to successfully get power in the local setting, in the sparse setting, but also in the global setting, the dense setting? So 4 methods that have tried to think about this are the mean, max, bin weight, and inspect methods. And as you can see, in the main, they generally tend to be more powerful in one situation or the other. The one exception to this maybe is this binary weighted or bin weight method, which is actually formulated by Bristol's Hare and Cho. And this tends to be pretty balanced. But in the main, these methods tend to be more powerful in one situation or the other. And I'm happy to talk about why at the end, but I'm conscious I'm already 20 minutes in and I don't want to spend too much time talking about the methods. I want to get onto the data. So it'd be nice to have something that tries to combine being powerful in the sparse and the dense setting. The other issue with these methods is that, as I mentioned very briefly in passing there, they're based on the Q-sum. And the Q-sum is most powerful when we have data that you know essentially are Gaussian with potentially a change in mean. They do work in other situations, but they tend to have low detection power. And we know that we have a situation where we have count data. We've just done a terrorist incident count per month. So it makes sense to model it as something that really doesn't look like a Poisson at all, a Gaussian at all. I've given away part of the story. I've not used a Poisson, but Poisson will be much more sensible than Gaussian. So what we do here is take a cost function approach. Now here comes equation 2. I'm not going to dwell on it at all. I'm just going to briefly point out one aspect of it. So the global cost function is here. Again, don't worry too much about it. The only thing I want to really highlight here is this C term. This is the segment cost function. This we can take as being anything where we can sort of model a nice likelihood. Let's say a likelihood that corresponds to count data in the terrorism example. We can then try and write down a global cost function. So we can essentially minimize anything where we have a sensible likelihood to start off with. And we do need to regularize it. So we do need a penalty in there as well, just to make sure we're not fitting changes absolutely everywhere. But that's the sole reason why we have this beta as a control. So we want to minimize this, and it's based on having a sensible model to write down at the start. And so I won't dwell on this equation because it looks horrible. All I'll say is it can be very, very inefficient to do this if we just try and elucidate all the possible minimizations that we can think of. So let's try and use something like dynamic programming. And if we use dynamic programming, then hey presto, we get something that's quadratic, which is certainly beating out, elucidating absolutely everything. Quadratic's still pretty bad though. I mean, right? If we're using QSUM, we'd expect things to be linear. So there's this gap between quadratic and linear. So let's try and improve things again. So this was 2005. Let's zoom into the future, see if anybody else has come up with anything. In 2012, there was this method that improved things to an expected linear cost, which is rather nice. And this is actually probably the gold standard of change point method. This is certainly the one that has the most citations that I can think of. It's only a few years old, yes, thousands of citations, doing really well. And the problem here really is this word expected. In many cases, it can still be quadratic. So a paper that we brought out earlier this year shows that you can actually make it worst case linear if you parallelize it in a couple of ways, this method from 2012. You do lose optimality if you do this. However, you still guarantee good statistical properties of where you're estimating the changes. But as I say, this guarantee that things are at worst linear is probably important for situations in which you have big data. And these two pictures here, this chocolate bar on the cards, just give you some clue as to exactly what parallelization methods we used. I won't dwell on them. I'll just leave them to your imagination for now. Okay, so that's nice, but this cost function is based on a data sequence. You might have seen from that horrible equation. We're not indexing over both sort of yi, j, your i's and your j's. You've just got one index there. You just got a data sequence. So how do we try and extend this to multiple dimensions? Well, the principal idea here is thinking about the penalty in a slightly cleverer way. It's a regularization term. So we have a penalty introduced for when we add in a change point, this beta. And we also have a penalty introduced for each variate that we say is affected by the change. So this is basically a complexity penalty. If the change is getting too complicated, we want to penalize it more. So for this change here, we have a total penalty of beta plus 2 alpha, and likewise for this one. Okay, that sort of makes sense. Can we write down the cost function? Turns out we can. It's horrible. I'm not going to write it on the slide. And can we minimize it efficiently? We can minimize it, but not efficiently. The resulting method is essentially order n to the 2d minus 1. And given that our specific way in which we've looked at the GDT, these stratifications, these 12 stratifications, we've essentially got 12 series. Our method is going to be n to the 23 here. Not a non-starter. I'm not going to live that long, much as it pains me to say it. So we need another method, maybe one that sacrifices, again, optimality to give us speed. So our proposal here is to use a saving, which is again sort of a similar principle to the QSUM setting. We're just comparing putting a single change versus having no change. So this again is the same form as the QSUM, except I've generalized it. Instead of thinking about the Gaussian change in mean, we just have here thinking about this C function, this cost function, which, as mentioned, can be just something based on the likelihood. Essentially a likelihood rating test, right? And we want to aggregate these to give us power in the sparse setting and the dense setting. And we've already covered exactly why. So we'll move on. Here is the ultimate test statistic. I said the ultimate test statistic. I'm sure somebody somewhere could think of something cleverer, but this is what we've used anyway. And we have two regimes here, essentially. We have something to detect sparse changes in this bit and something to detect dense changes in this bit. And the resulting method is called subset. And this is the most pretentious acronym in the talk. It stands for sparse and ubiquitous binary segmentation in efficient time. Yes, I know, I'm sorry. I don't know what I've unleashed on the world. It was basically because I wanted something to contrast with the word sparse, and I was looking for dense. It didn't fit into the acronym nicely. So I thought ubiquitous. I thought, oh, ubiquitous is a nice way of expressing the word dense. And then literally 2 days after I put this on the web, somebody said, why didn't you use the word universal? And I kicked myself. But yes, it still would have been pretty pretentious. But efficient time, it is efficient. It essentially is linear in both the number of time points and the number of variates. So it does have that going for it. And this is the last equation in the talk. You'll be delighted to hear. Everything here on is hopefully just pretty pictures. So this is just a picture to show that it has good type 2 error. We do actually detect the change when it's there. So this is subset against the 4 QSUM methods for a dense scenario, for for a sort of middling scenario, and for a sparse scenario, so sort of thinking global, regional, local. Clearly, when things are dense, it's sort of easier to detect things at all. So all the methods are doing pretty well, but subset is sort of the quickest to get there. So the quickest to arrive at having 0% type 2 error. So this is for increasing change magnitude, making the change more obvious. And different methods are competitive. So while subset is sort of either the best or nearly the best, other methods sort of do well in either the dense or the sparse setting, as discussed on the previous slide. This is just a plot to show that we actually do detect the change to reasonable accuracy. So it's a log concave density plot across various different simulations to show that we actually do find it in various examples. I should just clarify here, these simulations all have a single change at time 382. And for these last two examples, we have 1,000 variates and 1,000 time points. So it's almost a big data example. It's an N equals T example, which is, I appreciate, not a D, much greater than N example. Okay, and finally, just to convince you that when we say, yes, these variates have been affected by the change, we actually are coming out with reasonable estimates of exactly where has been impacted by the change point. These plots are showing that we not only detect where has been affected quite accurately, but we also don't mislabel things as changed when they've not actually changed. So the scale here is quite small. And these are all for sparse scenarios. So in theory, those examples where it's sort of hardest to really pin down exactly what's changed. The sort of lighter the red is, the sparser we get. And as you can see, in general, when we're not misidentifying things, particularly when the change is getting more and more obvious. Okay, so that's all the statistical properties out of the way. Let's focus on the data science. So we want to apply subset to the GDT. And as I mentioned before, we have count data. So I mentioned Poisson. And Poisson is probably the first thing that would occur to most of us. It's certainly what occurred to me first when I was looking at the data. The problem with Poisson, of course, is you might have over-dispersion. So if your data, as is the case with a GDT, have a mean and variance that really don't look simple, it's possible to use a Poisson likelihood-based approach. So what we did was use a negative binomial likelihood, sorry, which enables us to have 2 degrees of freedom. So we have an over-dispersion and a success probability. Now, this is the standard nomenclature for the 2 parameters using a success probability, because we have a sequence of Bernoulli trials with us basically stopping the sequence of trials when we've observed the R failure, with each trial having a success probability of P. In the context of the global terrorism example, essentially the success probability, the analog is probability of a terrorist attack. So I feel really guilty about this wording, but my hands are sort of tied by the fact that this is kind of the accepted terminology for it in the literature. But yes, I appreciate it. It was a bit unfortunate. So what we're doing is we're looking for changes in this parameter P, this probability of a terrorist attack, if you like. And we're going to be estimating this over-dispersion parameter, this R, which controls the over-dispersion, using a method of moments estimator. We could use an MLE, but I'm not going to do that because its computation is sort of quite expensive. We sort of lose this nice benefit we get from using subset. So here are the results. And we have here the Middle East and North Africa, North America, and Western Europe. Again, I'll just pick these probably because they might be of greatest interest to the audience. I couldn't have all 12 on one slide. I do have 3 more later, just to convince you of this method working well on different scales. So some changes to point out straight away. Let's start with the Middle East. We see straight away exactly what we sort of commented on when we looked at the slides. We could see that 2005 has a change here. 2012, maybe 2013. We see what looks like the beginning of a surge period. And a question I often get when I'm discussing this with people is, is the method reasonable at detecting these surges rather than sort of an abrupt change in things? And the answer is yes. There are various things going on underneath this algorithm that I haven't really talked about, which means that in essence, it can deal with them providing they're not very, very slow. So this is essentially trying to capture this behavior here, I guess. You can sort of see that here with America. So in North America, we have a change in, this is September 1971. And this is a period of time in which the activities of a Puerto Rican separatist group died down. And really since the 1970s, The main driver of terrorism in North America has been from anti-abortion groups in the main, particularly in the 1980s. This was the case. One thing to note between both Middle East and North Africa and North America is this shared change between 1998, but otherwise there's nothing that stands out as being the same. There's the trivial changes of 1970 and 2017 because we've changed from having no data to having data, and from having data to having no data. So, as I say, they're often called the trivial changes because, of course, they are. In our case, they don't matter at all. Moving on to Western Europe, and as I mentioned, this was particularly driven by terrorism in Northern Ireland in the 1970s and onwards. And the change I really want to focus on here is this one in February 1975. So this was a truce between particularly the British government and the Provisional IRA, which was observed by the Provisional IRA actually, but due to the fact that various Ulster loyalist groups were unhappy with the truce and subsequently continued attacking IRA targets, the IRA then went and responded in kind, and this led to arguably the worst years of the period. As you can probably see here, the sort of the latter 1970s were a pretty nasty time. But again, we see this change in 1998, and this does correspond to the Good Friday Agreement, which is certainly why I thought it was there. But it seems to be dense in all of these regions. So I got very excited. I thought something really, really quite fundamental was going on in 1998. Turns out that the fundamental thing might not necessarily have to do with something going on in the human experience, but rather perhaps corresponds to something more mundane. And it's this second bullet point here. There was a change in the data collection method. So I lied to you at the start. So I said that there was this definition of terrorism with these nice criteria that we can argue with or not. It turns out that definition has only been in place since 1998. That was when they changed the definition. Before that, the definition of terrorism was a bit more fluid. It was relying on, I think, 5 or 6 criteria, all of which were a bit ambiguous. And as a result, they sort of tried to tidy it up a bit. And of course, you're going to see shifts in the number of terrorist actions from 1998 onwards, just through the changing of the definition. So that's why it's there. But in a way, that's quite a nice sanity check. So it's suggesting that this phenomenon that we're seeing, which is with regards to most of these changes being sparse, which is what we saw from the previous slide, is actually true. It's not the case that there are going to be necessarily many dense changes across this period of time, this 50-year period. Because when we did detect a dense change, it was purely down to something that was sort of beyond the control of what was going on the ground, so to speak. So here are 3 more regions just to convince you of that fact. Again, you can see the dense change here in 1998, and also just to point out that this method works quite nicely on different scales. So Australasia and Oceania had a very low incident count per month throughout this entire period. The worst month was sort of 12 or 13 back in 1990. And the method still works quite well, even though various regions, again, having hundreds of incidents per month. So it's not necessarily going to be the case, unlike with some of the competitor methods, that we necessarily require everything being on the same scale, which is useful because, as I say, we've tried to control for this using the over-dispersion parameter. So I'm happy to talk about all of these specific changes later on if you like. Again, it's, for example, in Central America and the Caribbean, we've got things going on like various civil wars. But I won't dwell on this too much now because it's 22 and I want to get on to another application of this, because this was going to be the end of the story. I was going to be just talking about global terrorism and perhaps moving on and thinking about some further work in this wheelhouse. But then obviously COVID-19 hit, and I became quite interested in the economic impact of anti-COVID-19 policies. In particular, I was sort of had quite a bit of consternation at the fact that there really wasn't that good high frequency economic data out there with which we could analyze the immediate impact of, say, various NPIs, various non-pharmaceutical interventions in the UK and elsewhere in tackling the pandemic. And I thought I could potentially use Subset here as something to try and help out with this. So just to sort of elucidate on the kind of data we were thinking about. So I really would have liked to have seen something like credit card usage data here, but it's not open source. But this would have given us a really nice picture of exactly how much money was being sort of plowed into the economy from the consumer at the time. So we need something that's high frequency and open source. And what I went with in the end was energy data from ENSO. ENSO being another acronym, I can't remember exactly what it is now, but I can look it up if anybody is particularly interested. And this is for a number of European countries since the 1st of January 2019 that you can access data. I think it's 28 European countries. It's not precisely the EU, but it's basically the EU plus I think Russia and Norway. And you have here data collected on often an hourly basis, indicating the electricity usage for each country since, as I say, the beginning of last year. So I thought this would be quite a nice data set to use because I could use 2019 and the beginning of 2020 to baseline the standard electricity usage for each of these countries, and then sort of see if there's interesting things that are happening abruptly that correspond to changes in policy. Not least because it sort of seemed intuitive to me that when you have a change in economic performance, you're naturally going to see change in energy usage. It might not be obvious exactly how these two things are linked, but it might be helpful to somebody out there somewhere. So alongside this, we did actually have access to a record of when policies were enacted by each country and a notion of how severe each policy was. And this is still being compiled to this day by the Blavatnik School in Oxford. So this is a plot from the end of October indicating how stringent each country was in its measures. Sort of darker colours indicate more stringent, lighter colours less stringent. And this takes into account everything from whether schools are open to whether we're all being asked to stay at home, whether we're all being requested to work from home, whether public transport is being restricted, whether there are public information campaigns, etc. And I just want to, so this is clearly just a snapshot, a single day in time. I just want to show you what this looks like across the entire year because it's quite nice. So I'll stop sharing my screen here and move over to a different screen over here, which is, there we go. So I hope everybody will be able to see this. So this is exactly the same thing. This is the Blavatnik School at Oxford. You can access this. The data, again, are open source. And basically what you see is a recording of this. So this is moving from January into February, and we can see China sort of straight off the mark is pretty stringent, closely followed by Italy, and then suddenly everywhere cottons onto the fact that this is pretty serious. And you see an awful lot of dark colours. Getting into May and June, much of Europe starts to open up again. The UK stays locked down for a little bit longer. Indeed, actually, the UK sort of remains one of the more stringent countries throughout the summer. But as we move into the autumn, it's pretty clear that things are getting fractionally worse again. So I'm sure this picture is at least allegorically familiar to many of us. So that's a nice resource and something we had at our disposal during the summer, if not all the way for the end of December. So I will just go back to the slides and talk about a little bit about how we use this alongside the energy data to try and track economic changes using subset. So the result is this. So this is the corrected energy data, corrected with respect to sort of beginning of 2020, 2019, on sort of, the middle of January to the beginning of June, which is when I was thinking about this, was when I was interested in this problem. And as mentioned, this is for a number of European countries, but I'm only going to summarize 9 here. And at first I was just going, well, I've got some change points. They potentially are going to align with some interesting points in time and policy, but I'm not really expecting great things because, again, we're proxying something that's latent and quite difficult to measure. However, this change here in the UK, this second red line from the left, it corresponds to almost to the hour to the Prime Minister's "You must stay at home" speech on the 23rd of March, and at this point I thought, this might actually have legs in terms of tracking something that's of value. There is a dense change point as well. So unlike in the GDT example, there seems to be a dense change point that seems to be unrelated to a change in how the data were collected. It's on the 5th of April. It's in the UK. You can see it probably most clearly in France here as well. I thought this might be down to a change in the tax year. So in the UK, the 5th of April, I think is the last day of the financial year, right? But it's not the case that in France that you see that happens. It's not the financial year, I think, just corresponds to the calendar year. So I'm a little bit stunned by this to this day. I'm not entirely sure what happened on the 5th of April. France did not change any policies, but it turns out to be a dense change. I'm also not convinced it was down to a change in, for example, the weather. I can find no convincing weather reports that things got sort of warmer almost everywhere on the 5th of April. The other quite interesting picture here is that there is a very clear asymmetry between locking down and coming out of lockdown, if you like. So in both Spain and Italy, which were somewhat ahead of the UK, we can see this kind of asymmetric effect here in locking down in this direction versus trying to sort of liberalize things, trying to relax these MPIs. Yes, we do see an effect in what we'll call economic performance, but is, as I say, just this. All we can really infer is electricity usage has gone up a little bit, but it's really not compensating for what happened earlier in the year. So that potentially was something that is of interest, particularly if we're trying to, say, learn from Spain and Italy and trying to efficaciously come out of lockdown to maximize economic performance, say. We might not necessarily want to completely emulate them. We might want to, say, try and match up with those countries that seem to have a similar economic profile to us, such as, say, Germany. So again, in June, the picture in Germany was pretty bleak, but overall the hit to its economy was pretty modest, particularly compared to, say, the UK or France. You can see here, for example, that the changes really don't have all that much of a quantitative effect on things that are happening, particularly compared to the UK and France. However, this might be down to various quite latent economic variables in Germany's economy that I'm happy to take questions on at the end. And speaking of the end, this is the last slide here. So this is just matching up the changes in the MPIs with the change points that we found. So the darker colors again correspond to when this Blavatnik data set says things are very, very stringent, whereas lighter colors match up with when things are not stringent at all. And you can see that these red lines most of the time track the changes in MPIs. There are, as I say, quite interesting changes like this one on the 5th of April that I still can't satisfactorily explain for France. Again, if somebody was in France on the 5th of April and would like to chime in with exactly what was going on, I'd be really, really quite interested. So that for now, I think might be that. There are other things I could talk about with respect to this COVID-19 project, but I'll probably take questions over that if that's okay. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sam. And apologies for not giving a proper introduction. You beat me to it.
Quite all right.
So do we have questions? I think there's plenty of opportunities to just ask them. You can put them in the chat if you want.
Yeah, hi Dan, Kate here. Hi Sam.
Hi Kate.
Nice to see you. Yeah, I was wondering about how you use these kinds of data to nudge policy or kind of get the message out or develop impact.
Okay, I'm going to stop recording. I'll pause it.
While you're not recording, can I ask a question?
Yeah, so that's a very good point, Dan. So yes, you raised two important issues there. First of all, thinking about, as I sort of briefly alluded to in this talk, thinking about these kind of gradual changes as opposed to surges, but also thinking about outliers in terms of, might be a period or a point in time which is polluting what's going on with the test statistic. So the first of these, this thinking about this sort of gradual change rather than a step change, and this is particularly relevant in the economic example, the economic data we saw with respect to COVID. There is a post-processing step going on underneath the method, which, while not perfect, in practice seems to deal with it most of the time, where most of the time I can try and define rigorously for you offline if you like. But yes, I accept if you've got something that is sort of very, very gradual indeed. I've actually seen quite a nice method to deal with something like this recently, based on something called pyramid recurrent neural networks, which also quite interestingly deals with natural language, changes in natural language, which is something that I'm quite interested in at the moment. This second question about, second point about having anomalies, basically just means you have to change the cost function. So before I talked about using a likelihood model, it's quite natural actually to use something based on a kind of non-parametric measure of things, quantile-based measure. So instead of focusing on things like mean and variance for your summary statistics, as is typical in the Gaussian setting or even the negative binomial setting. I mean, you can reparameterize the negative binomial using mean and variance. You can reparameterize instead, or try and think about these distributions instead using a median or your favorite quantile. So unless things are very polluted indeed, then in practice it shouldn't be an issue. I haven't specifically coded this up, but a colleague of mine has, and the method there is quite successful. If you're interested, it's called MV Kappa, and I think it's published now. It's certainly a preprint now.
Great, thank you. Are there any more questions? Okay, well, in that case, thank you very much, Sam.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite.
Virtual round of applause. And there's one more data science seminar before Christmas, I think. Yeah, I've somehow closed the schedule. I thought I had it up, so I think it's in a fortnight. And so hopefully see you there.
Thanks very much.
Yes.
Thanks, really great. Thanks.
Cheers.